Soft, eerie background music begins, slow jazz fading in and out. Have you ever heard of a killer who claimed he was a demon and promised not to kill you if you played jazz music? It sounds like the plot of some strange horror movie, right? But this actually happened. Over a century ago, in the heart of New Orleans, a city famous for its music and late-night energy, people lived in absolute terror. Someone was stalking the streets after dark, breaking into homes, attacking people in their sleep with an axe. And then one day, the city received a letter, a chilling, almost taunting message. The writer claimed he wasn't human at all, but a creature from the hottest hell. And in that letter, he gave the city a choice. On a certain Tuesday night, he would be roaming the streets. If he found a home where jazz music was playing, the people inside would live. If there was silence, they would die. This is the true story of the Axeman of New Orleans, a murderer who vanished without a trace and left behind one of the strangest mysteries in American history. Gentle, upbeat jazz fades in, the kind that makes you picture warm lights and busy streets. New Orleans in 1918 was unlike anywhere else in America. The air was thick with the smell of fresh bread from corner bakeries, gumbo simmering in kitchens, and the sweet smoke from street vendors cooking late into the night. Music wasn't just entertainment here, it was part of life. You could hear the sound of trumpets, clarinets, and pianos drifting from bars, from street corners, even from front porches. But beneath the music and the laughter, the city was going through changes. The First World War had just ended, and soldiers were returning home. The deadly Spanish flu pandemic had taken thousands of lives only months earlier, and in neighborhoods across the city, immigrant families, especially Italian grocers, were working long hours to keep their small businesses alive. These grocers were more than shopkeepers. They were the heart of their communities, trusted by neighbors for food, supplies, and even a bit of gossip. Their stores were often attached to their homes, meaning they lived right behind or above the shop, and that detail would soon make them easy targets. While jazz filled the streets, something else was moving quietly through the city, something that didn't belong to the music, the laughter, or the light. It belonged to the shadows, and it was about to make its presence known. Jazz fades out, replaced by a faint, unsettling hum or low bass note. It was May 23, 1918, a warm spring night in New Orleans. Joseph and Catherine Maggio, an Italian couple who owned a small grocery, had just gone to bed. They lived right above their shop, like many grocers did. Sometime after midnight, someone crept to their back door. This person didn't smash their way in. They worked quietly. With a chisel, they removed a panel from the door, just big enough to reach inside and unlock it. No one heard a thing. Once inside, the intruder took the couple's own axe from the backyard. He moved into their bedroom, and in the silence of the early morning hours, he attacked. Both Joseph and Catherine were struck in their sleep. Then, with a straight razor, their throats were cut. Joseph's brothers, who lived nearby, found them later that morning. Joseph was barely alive but couldn't speak. Catherine was already gone. Joseph died minutes after help arrived. The scene horrified police. There was no robbery. Money and valuables sat untouched. Whoever did this came only to kill, and to leave just as quietly as he arrived. Neighbors began locking their doors for the first time in years, and while no one knew it yet, this was just the beginning. The Axeman had made his entrance, and he wasn't done. Low, steady rhythm in the background, almost like a slow heartbeat. The Maggio murders were shocking, but they weren't an isolated event. In fact, over the next year, the pattern would become disturbingly clear. The Axeman didn't pick random houses. Most of his victims were Italian grocers or their families, hard-working people who lived above or behind their small shops. They kept long hours, often closing late at night and waking before sunrise. That made them vulnerable, asleep during the quietest hours, with doors that could be carefully dismantled instead of broken. And the method? Almost always the same. The killer would use a tool found at the scene, usually an axe from the victim's own property. He'd remove a panel from the back door, reach in, and unlock it without making a sound. Once inside, he struck quickly and brutally. Then he would leave the weapon behind, often wiping it clean. In August of 1918, another attack shook the city. A woman named Anna Schneider was found in her bed, her face covered in cuts and bruises. She survived, but couldn't recall the details, only that she woke to a figure standing over her. Weeks later, the Romano family was targeted. Charles Romano was killed, and his wife Rosie was badly injured. She described the attacker as a tall, dark figure who fled into the night. The randomness of survival made the terror worse. Some lived, some didn't. There was no way to predict who would be next. By now, people had started calling him the Axeman. And every grocer in New Orleans knew one thing: if they were on his list, there was no safe place to hide. Distant jazz begins to fade in, eerie and slightly off-key. On March 13th, 1919, the New Orleans Times-Picayune published something that sent chills through the entire city. It was a letter, supposedly from the Axeman himself. It wasn't short, and it wasn't written like the usual threats the police received. This one was strange, almost theatrical. It began by claiming the writer was not human at all, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. He mocked the police for failing to catch him. He bragged about his power to strike whenever he wished. Then came the most bizarre part. He announced that the following Tuesday night he would be roaming the city again, and anyone who wanted to be spared had to follow one very simple rule. If jazz music was playing in your home, you would live. If not, you would die. The city's reaction? A mix of disbelief, panic, and determination. That night was only days away, and for the people of New Orleans, it would be the strangest night they had ever lived through. Smooth, lively jazz begins to play, but with an undercurrent of low, suspenseful bass beneath it. Tuesday night arrived, March 19th, 1919. By sundown, New Orleans looked and sounded different. Everywhere you went, you could hear music. Bars and dance halls were packed to the walls. Neighbors gathered on porches with gramophones. Some families even hired live bands to play in their front yards. In one neighborhood, a man was seen standing in the street with a trumpet, blasting jazz into the night air. In another, a family set their record player right on the windowsill so the music spilled out into the street. No one wanted silence. Silence that night meant danger. And while people danced, laughed, and played as if it were a celebration, there was a tension behind every smile. Everyone knew the music wasn't for joy. It was for survival. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. And when morning arrived, there was a collective sigh of relief. No one had been killed that night. The Axeman had kept his word, and in doing so, he left New Orleans with one of the strangest, most haunting nights in its history. The lively jazz fades away, replaced by an empty, hollow sound, like wind through an alley. For a brief moment, the city dared to hope. Maybe the letter had been a joke. Maybe the Axeman had made his final appearance that night of music. But the hope didn't last. Only a few months later, the killings began again. In August 1919, grocer Steve Boca was attacked in his home. He survived but remembered nothing except waking to find a shadowy figure standing over him. Then came one of the Axeman's most infamous attacks, the murder of Mike Pepitone in October 1919. Pepitone's wife woke to find her husband lying in bed, surrounded by blood. On the walls and ceiling, dark splatters marked the violent struggle. She caught a glimpse of a large man fleeing into the night, but he was gone before anyone could stop him. And then, nothing. No more break-ins, no more murders, no more letters, just silence. The Axeman of New Orleans seemed to vanish from the face of the earth, leaving behind a trail of bodies, unanswered questions, and a city that never forgot the fear of those nights. Background shifts to a low, investigative tone, steady, quiet beats like footsteps. Over the years, people have tried to unmask the Axeman. The truth is, we still don't know who he was, but the theories, they're plenty. One of the earliest suspects was a man named Joseph Mumfre, a small-time criminal with ties to the Italian underworld. Some believe he targeted grocers because they refused to pay protection money to the mafia. This theory gained traction when Mumfre was shot and killed in Los Angeles in December 1920, supposedly by the widow of Mike Pepitone, the Axeman's last known victim. But there's no hard proof that Mumfre was the Axeman, just a suspicious coincidence. Others think the Axeman wasn't a single person at all. Maybe the attacks were the work of different people, inspired by the first murder, all lumped together under one terrifying name. Then there's the drifter theory. Some say he was a traveling serial killer, a man who came to New Orleans, killed, and then moved on to another city. It's possible. And of course, there are those who take the Axeman's letter literally. They whisper about the supernatural, that maybe he really was something inhuman, slipping through the streets like a ghost. The problem? There's no clear evidence for any of these ideas. No fingerprints, no confirmed eyewitnesses, just shadows, and a name that still sends a chill down New Orleans' spine. Soft, slow jazz begins to play, warm but tinged with unease. The story of the Axeman of New Orleans is more than just a true crime case. It's a strange mix of horror, mystery, and music, all woven into one unforgettable chapter of American history. To this day, no one knows who he was. No one knows why he chose his victims, or why he stopped. What we do know is that, for a brief time in 1919, an entire city believed that the sound of jazz could keep death away. And for one night, it actually worked. Maybe. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.